Well, folks, as we build our Snacktacular app, we've got to set up the user interface. Everything that we've done in this video, if you've been following along with our previous tutorials, you've already learned. I'll quickly demonstrate what you need to do. That'll be followed by some challenge slides. And then, of course, after the challenge slides, we'll have our full solution. Starting in the next video, we'll cover new concepts. Let's build. But before we can go full stack, we need to have an interface set up to hold our data. And we'll put this together very quickly. Everything in this video is stuff that we've already done. You can look at the challenge slides that follow and give the creation of this UI a shot on your own, just to confirm that you've got all of these earlier concepts down. Or you can follow along with the fast-paced UI build that's right after the challenge slides. Now, by the end of this video, this is the UI that we should have. We'll name this view controller the Spot List View Controller. We've already got that set up. We'll add a table view controller with a custom cell that you see here. We'll put an add bar button item in the upper right-hand corner, and there's a toolbar down here, although it's currently blank. We'll change that in a future video. The data in here is just bogus placeholder data for now. We'll also create a custom class with new data in another video. Click the cell, we get a show segue to the new view controller that we'll call Spot Detail View Controller. We've got a few UI elements here and space to add some more. Now there are 4 labels embedded in a sub view, and you can't see it, but there's a collection view in here too. The lookup place bar button item is in the toolbar down below on the right-hand side. The cancel button works. Clicking plus back on the Spot List View Controller will present the Detail View Controller modally and at full screen. Cancel works here too. Let's build. So I recommend you give these challenge slides a shot. If you decide you want to go through the step-by-step tutorial, that starts around the 7-minute mark in this video. You should know how to do everything in here, and we'll have a video solution right afterwards so you can check your work, or follow along again if you run into a snag. Now the first step, we're going to set up a Spot List View Controller, and we're going to add a basic table view to this. Now this is in the currently unnamed view controller with a sign out button in here. So what we'll do is we'll create a file for this view controller. We're going to name it Spots List View Controller.swift. We'll create a temporary string array named spots, and we'll populate it with some placeholder text just to make sure that our table view is working. We'll add the table view to the Spot List View Controller and do everything we need so that the spots show up in the table view. Now we'll call the table view like we normally do. We'll set the cell identifier to capital cell, which is what we normally call it. We'll put the table view methods in an extension, which is what we typically do. We'll set the table view cell selection attribute to none, and we'll select the navigation controller and set the bottom bar to the toolbar, not the tab bar, but the toolbar. Now with the table view set up, next we're going to create a custom table view cell that looks like the one that you see here. We're going to call it Spot Table View Cell. It should be 60 points in height. We're going to name this first label name label. It should have the text restaurant name. It'll be Avenir Next Condensed Demi Bowl 24. The text color will be dark gray. The constraints will be 488 top left and right, height 33. Then right over here we've got our distance label. That's going to have some placeholder text in there. The font is going to be System Regular 15, and the constraints are going to be bottom and left 4 and 16. The height will be 18 points. The rating label that you see over here has this placeholder text. That's also going to be System Regular 15 points. It's going to be aligned to the right, and it's going to have bottom and right alignment of 4 and 8 respectively, 18 points tall. And with our table view set up, then we're going to set up our detail view controller. Now first we'll add a bar button item in the upper right hand corner. This will be a standard system add button. Then we'll add a new view controller. We'll create a file for this new view controller called Spot Detail View Controller. That's this guy over here. We'll add 2 segues the way that we normally do. We'll have one segue going from the table view cell into our new view controller. We'll make that a show segue going directly from one to the other. We'll also embed this view controller in a navigation controller, and then we'll create a present modally segue going from the plus button up to the new navigation controller. Now we want to set the identifier for this segue to add detail, and we also want to make sure that the presentation is going to be full screen in here. Now we'll call this segue show detail. Then we're also going to set up a cancel button in here, and we'll put our cancel code into cancel button pressed as we normally do. Now inside this view controller, we're going to have a view which has got constraints 0, 0, 0 and a height of 380. And inside we're going to put all of these other user interface elements that you see. So we've got a text field named name text field. The placeholder text is going to be restaurant name, font Avenir Next Condensed Bold bold 24 point, constraints top left right 888, height 33. The address field is below. The placeholder text will just be address. This will be system regular font 14 point. Constraints top left and right will be 288 and the height will be 17. Then we're going to add a collection view so you can see it's inside of this view that we've got, this subview that we've created. It's going to be constrained 242 from the very top of the view. Now that's 242 from the top of the subview. Remember, by default, it'll probably say that it's going to constrain it to the address field. So you want to make sure that you change that and constrain it 242 from the top of the subview. The height should be 100. The minimum spacing in the collection view should be 1 for the cells, 2 for lines. The scroll direction should be horizontal. Hide the horizontal and vertical scroll indicators. And the collection view cell should be 100 by 100. The height of this is also 100 points. This is just a placeholder label with some text average rating. That's Avenir Next Condensed Demi-Bold Font 13 points. Constrain it top left 88 from the label to the collection view. That should be 18 points high. Then to the right of this, you're going to have a rating label. Again, this is going to be your IB outlet name. The text is just going to be a placeholder for now, underscore dot underscore. Make the font Verdana bold 22 with system red, text alignment centered, and constrain that top left 60, so it's right even with the right hand side of your average rating label. The width should be 45 and the height should be 26. Now you're also going to have toolbars down here. Make sure that they're in both navigation controllers. They should be opaque toolbars. Hint, you can add those right from the attributes inspector of the navigation controllers themselves without having to drag a toolbar over. Finally, add a bar button item in the lower right hand corner of this view controller. Look up place and make sure it's over on the right hand side. So why don't you give this a shot? You've seen all of this stuff in our previous tutorials, and if you get stuck, I'll show you how to do it right after this. But pause, give it a shot, and let's look at a solution. So in the code we wrote previously, this view controller that has the sign out button on it does not have a Swift file associated with it. So we're going to need to code some stuff up in here. Let's create a Swift file for this view controller. So I want to put that right below my login view controller. So I'm going to right click on login view controller, select new file. This is a Cocoa Touch class because we're subclassing view controller, then click next. I always go down here and make sure that I set the subclass properly, so that's going to be UI View Controller. I'll name this Spot List View Controller, then click Next and click Create. You can get rid of any of these extra comments in here. We don't need those. Now let's make sure that we identify that file with this view controller. So let's click on Main Storyboard, then let's click on the dock of the view controller with the sign out button, click on the Identity Inspector, and set the class to Spot List View Controller. Press Enter. If I hover my cursor over in the dock, now I can see this guy is called Spot List View Controller. Nice. Now let's head back to Spot List View Controller. I'm going to create a temporary string array to hold some names of restaurants, just to make sure that my table view is working. We'll expand this with a more complex data structure in a future video. So I'll say right here under the class name var spots equals, and then inside of brackets, Island Creek Oysters, El Palone Tacos by BC, Shake Shack up the street from BC, and Pino's Pizza. Make sure you get the Sicilian. Now back in Main Storyboard, click the Library button, search for Table View, and drag that over into this new view controller that you just added, the Spot List View Controller. Let's constrain that to the side 0, 0, 0, and 0. Add 4 constraints. Now back in the Attributes Inspector, for the Table View, let's add 1 prototype cell. Then let's click on that Table View cell, and we'll give it the identifier capital C-E-L-L. And while we're in here, why don't we set Selection to None? This way there won't be any lingering gray selection on our Table View cell after we've clicked on it. Now let's create an outlet for that table view. So we'll click on Spot List View Controller and Option click on Main Storyboard to get into Assistant Editor mode. Then Control drag from the table view. I'm going to do that from the document outline because I can be absolutely sure that I've clicked on the table view and not the cell or the view. Drag this just below our class definition line. Let go, and we're going to call that table view lower camel case. Then the key to remember how to set up a basic table view in a view controller is delegate data source, delegate data source. So in view.did_load, we'll say tableview.delegate equals self, tableview.dataSource equals self. Then down below the last curly, we'll set up an extension with our table view methods. After the word extension, I'll copy and paste the name of this class, which is SpotList View Controller, then colon, and remember, delegate data source, delegate data source. If I start to type in table view delegate, code completion reminds me of the protocol that I need, UI table view delegate, press return, comma. Then if you type in table view data source, code completion gives you what you want, UI table view data source, press return to select that, open and close curlies, and after just a moment, Xcode will let you know that this class does not conform to the protocol UI table view data source, but Xcode offers to write the stubs. Stub me! Click that fix. To finish these off, we've done this over half a dozen times in our course so far. In number of rows in section, we'll say return, and that's going to be our array spots.count. Then down here in cell for row at, we prepare and then return a cell. So we start with let cell equals tableview.dequeue reusable cell. Choose this one with the identifier and the index path. The identifier is going to be the string in double quotes, capital CELL. The index path is lower camel case index path that's passed in by this function call. We'll return the cell, and then we set the cell up in between. We'll say cell dot text label question mark dot text. Remember, that gives us the text property of the built-in text label in the default cell configuration, and we'll set that equal to spots, our spots array bracket index path dot row. Now's a good time to build and run just to make sure that everything is working okay, so click that play button. If you hadn't previously logged out, then you jumped right to the table view, but I need to log in. But as soon as I do that, I've segued over and I see all of my spots in the table view. Nice! You can sign out again just to try and make sure everything's working. It is. Perfect. Let's keep going. Now to create a custom table view cell, we're going to need a special Swift file subclassing UI table view cell. So why don't we do that right below our SpotList viewcontroller.swift file. Right click that, select new file, Cocoa Touch class. Next, we're going to subclass UI table view cell. Make sure it's table view cell, and I'll name this class spot table view cell. Click create, and you can delete everything between the class curlies. Now let's head over to main storyboard. Open the identity inspector, make sure that you've clicked on the table view cell, and then under class, we'll select the file we just created, which is spot table view cell. Now I need to set the cell height, so I'm going to zoom in here, click on the size inspector, make sure that you've clicked on the cell, click off automatic first, and then set the row height to 60. Then remember, we're also going to need a function for this, so back in SpotList viewcontroller.swift in our extension, we'll add another function before the last curly. And hey, this is Xcode. You don't have to remember the exact name or syntax for this. If you just remember the word height, Xcode will remind you. You got a function in here, height for row at. When you include this, the table view will ask its delegate for the height to use in the row in a specific location. Press return for this one. All we need to do is to return 60. It's a bit confusing, but just remember you need both of these steps, set the height in the size inspector, and add the height for row at function. Then let's head back to the main storyboard. We'll zoom in and set up the interface for our custom cell. So click on library, drag over a label. I'll Command D to duplicate and make a second label, dropping it just below the first one. Then I'll take this first label up top, stretch it out end to end. You don't have to be too precise because we're going to constrain this. And let's head over to the attributes inspector, click on the T by font. We'll set a custom font, Avenir Next Condensed, Demi Bold 24. Then I'm going to set the text color to dark gray, and I'll put in some placeholder text that says restaurant name. Now let's constrain this 488 top left and right with a height of 33. Add 3 constraints. For the label just below this, why don't we put in some placeholder text that says distance, 9999.9. We'll keep the font as the system font, but we'll set it to 15 points. Then we'll Command D and duplicate that and drag this other label over to the right. Click back on that first label, and we'll set the constraints. 16 to the left, this is 4 to the bottom, none to the top, and the height will be 18 points. Add 3 constraints. You can stretch this label out to the right just a bit, but there should be plenty of space. Then I'll click on this last label over to the right, and I'll change the placeholder text from distance to AVG period rating, 6.0. I'll give this a bit more space on the left, and then I'll add constraints. I'll just add right and bottom here, 8 and 4 respectively. I'll keep the height at 18 points, add 3 constraints, and our interface for our custom cell looks good. Now let's create IB outlets for these 3 labels. So what we'll do is we'll click on Spot Table View Cell, option click on Main Storyboard. So we're in the Assistant Editor, and then we'll control drag over from each of these 3 labels. The first one we'll call Name Label, the second one Distance Label, and the third one Rating Label. And now that we've created a custom class where we've subclassed UI table view cell, we need to make sure in our cell for row at that we're setting up our cell as our new subclass, which is spot table view cell and not UI table view cell. So over here in spot list table view controller, if you option click on top of cell, you see how it currently says that it's a UI table view cell. Now that's not good enough for us. If we want to access all of the different IB outlets we just created, those are inside of the subclass called spot table view cell. Remember what we need to do to be able to access those properties? We'll go right up to the line just above this let cell equal line. We want to say as exclamation point spot table view cell. That will downcast our cell value to the subclass of that new table view cell. That means it now knows about all of the IB outlets that are inside of it. And so now I'm going to backspace over the old generic text label that was in there, and I can say dot name label, which is our IB outlet for our custom cell, question mark dot text, and this new label in the custom cell is what will be populated. Now we'll eventually write code to take care of the other two labels too, but let's build and run and see how things look. I've already logged in, so it's not going to ask me to log in again, but I got my custom cell with all of my placeholder text in there for each of the elements in my spots array. Looking great. Now before we add a view controller for the place detail, let's put a bar button item into the navigation controller just above the table view so that we can add those new places. So let's click library, find a bar button item, drag it over to the right hand side of the navigation controller above the table view, and let's change the system item to add, and it turns into a plus sign. Now let's add that new view controller, click library, find the view controller, drag it over to the right of all of our existing view controllers. Now let's create a Swift file for this new view controller. I'm going to right click on spot table view cell. I want to put my new file below that. I'll select new file. Make sure that you're subclassing UI view controller. I'm going to name this spot detail view controller. Click next, then click create. Then let's set the identity. I'm going to click on the dock of my new view controller to make sure that I've selected it. Click on the identity inspector, and under class, we'll select spot detail view controller, the class we just created. Now we want to embed this view controller in a navigation controller, so while it's still selected, I could go under the editor menu, but instead I'm going to go down here in the lower right hand corner under the embed menu, and I'm going to select navigation controller. Boom, the navigation controller is attached. I'm now going to drag that above the existing view controller just to make more room. Now I want to create a table view segue when the cell in spot list view controller is clicked on. So in the document outliner, I'm going to click on the cell in spot list view controller, and I'm going to control drag directly over into my new view controller. I'll let go, and I'll select show as my segue type. This segue line is drawn. Now I need to give it an identifier. Click on the circle in your segue line to select it. I'll go up under the attributes inspector, and in the identifier, I'll call this show detail upper camel case. Now let's create the segue from our add bar button item. So I'm going to control drag from this plus button up to the navigation controller that the spot detail view controller is embedded in. I'll let go, make sure that this segue type is selected as present modally. Then let's give that segue an identifier. So we'll click the circle on the segue line, go up to the attributes inspector, and for this identifier, we'll put in add detail upper camel case. Now also very important for this app, while the segue is selected, we want to go down into presentation and select full screen. So full screen is key. That'll make sure view will appear and view did appear will fire when we return to the previous view controller. Now let's add our cancel bar button item. So click library, find a bar button item, drag it right on top of our back button, and we're going to change the system item type to cancel. Let's add the IB action for this too. So I'll click on spot detail view controller.swift and option click on main storyboard. So we're in the assistant editor mode. I'm going to get rid of these green comments. We don't need those. Make sure you don't delete any of the curlies. And to create the IB action from the cancel button, I'm going to control drag from the cancel button over just before the last curly, and I'm going to call this cancel button pressed. And I'll set the type to a UI bar button item. Click connect. Then our code inside here is the standard code we've been using for cancel button pressed. You can certainly copy this from any apps. First line of this code is let is presenting in add mode equals presenting view controller is UI navigation controller. Then we'll say if is presenting in add mode. That means it was presented by a navigation controller. That means it must have been presented modally. That means we have to use a dismiss instead of a pop. In between the curlies, we say dismiss. Animated will be true, completion handle will be nil. Otherwise, else, open and close curlies, we'll say navigation controller, lower camel case, question mark, dot pop view controller with animated true. Now we're going to add a UI view, and we'll put a bunch of user interface elements inside of this. This will eventually become a header and another table view that will hold restaurant reviews. This will eventually allow us to pack a lot of user interface elements that can be scrolled vertically so that you can use this even on a smaller iOS device. But for now, click on library, Search for a view. The best way to find that is to type UI view in here. You want to select the standard view in the little gray square here and not the view controller. Drag that over and plop it into our new view controller. Then let's set constraints. We'll do 0, 0, and 0 for top, left, and right. Then we'll set the height to 380 and add 4 constraints. Now these sizes will be the same on any device size that you develop on, so you don't have to worry about developing on the smallest iPhone for this project. Then we can put the user interface elements inside. So click Library, drag over a text field, stretch it out side to side. The sample text we'll put inside will be restaurant name. The font will be custom. Avenir Next Condensed, bold style, 24 points. I'll constrain this 888 top, left, and right. Set the height to 33 and add 4 constraints. Now we'll click on Library, drag over another text field, stretch it out side to side. The placeholder text will say address. We'll keep this font at System Regular 14, but we'll set the constraints to 2, 8, and 8, top, left, and right, with a height of 17, adding 4 constraints. Next up, let's add our collection view. This is eventually going to hold user-submitted photos of this spot or restaurant. So we'll click on Library, search for collection view, drag it over, place it toward the bottom of this view, stretch it out from side to side. Then we'll set constraints, and these steps are going to be important. So for the top constraint, the first thing that you want to do is you want to pull down on the little arrow next to this top constraint, and you want to select the view. Now, after you select it, then you want to set the number to 242. This will make sure that the top of this collection view is going to be 242 points from the top of the view that it's inside of. And again, you want to make the selection first before you type in the number. The two sides, left and right, should be 0 and 0, and the height of this collection view is going to be 100. Then add 4 constraints. Then with the collection view still selected, head over to the size inspector. We're going to set the cell size to 100 width and 100 height. Then we'll move down to minimum spacing, and we'll say for cells is 1 and for lines is 2. Then we have to set some attributes, so click on the attributes inspector. And for our scroll direction, we're going to set that to horizontal. And down here under scroll view and indicators, we're going to check off so that there are no horizontal or vertical indicators. Then we're going to add a static label to say average rating, so we'll click on Library, drag over a label, position it to the left side just below our collection view, then click on the T next to font, and you can set the font attributes to look like this. Custom, Avenir Next Condensed, Demi-Bold, and 13. Text will be avg.rating:. Then we'll click on the library and put another label just to the right of this, and this is going to hold the actual rating number. So drag that label over to the left of the average rating label you just added. We'll set this font to a custom font. I'm going to choose Verdana as the font family. Set the style to bold and the size to 22. I'm also going to set the text color to system red. And for the default text in here to indicate no rating, I'll put in underscore, period, underscore. Now I'll set constraints. So I'm going to click first on the average rating label, and I'm going to set the constraints to top 8, left 8, and I'll set the height to 18. Click on Add 3 Constraints. Then I'll click on the underscore dot underscore label, and I'm going to set the alignment to this label to center alignment. Then click Add New Constraints. And I'll set the constraints to top 6, left-hand side 0, so it's flush right up against average rating. I'll set the width to 45, the height to 26, and add 4 constraints. Now we've got navigation bars on the top of our view controllers. Now let's add toolbars to the bottom. And we're going to start that off by scrolling over to the leftmost navigation controller. I'm just positioning here, but what you really want to do is make sure that you've clicked on the dock of that leftmost navigation controller so that it's selected. Then go up to the Attributes Inspector. Then under Bottom Bar, select Opaque Toolbar, and make sure you're selecting Toolbar and not Tab Bar. That's an easy mistake to make, and I've seen a lot of students do that. And you'll see the toolbar shows up not only at the bottom of the selected navigation controller on the left, but also all the view controllers to the right that are going to be part of the view controller stack embedded in this navigation controller. Now you could override the bottom bar setting as an attribute in each of these view controllers, but the default is to infer the style from, in this case, the navigation controller that these controllers are embedded in. And that's what we want. Now we have to do the same thing with our other navigation controller, so let's go up here, click on that navigation controller, and then in the Attributes Inspector, for the bottom bar, we also want to select Opaque Toolbar. Now we're going to add a bar button item to the toolbar on the rightmost view controller. That's the one with a cancel button on it, so let's click on Library, hunt for the bar button item, drag it over into the toolbar, change the title to Lookup Place. We'll add Google Places autocomplete to this button in a future video. Now to get this button to move over to the right, we're going to drag a flexible space bar button item, position that just to the left of this bar button item, and we'll see we move our Lookup Place bar button item over to the right. And now just before we build and run, let's make sure that we add these IB outlets for these interface elements that we just added to Spot Detail View Controller. So click on Spot Detail View Controller, Option click on Main Storyboard. We're side by side in Assistant Editor mode. Then I'll Control drag from this text field that I have restaurant name in. Make sure that that's the text field that you've got. I'm going to name this Name Text Field. Below that is the Address field. I'm going to click that in the document outline, drag over, name this Address Text Field. And then the other one that I want to create an outlet for is this underscore dot underscore. This is going to be called the rating label. Now we're done. Let's go ahead and build and run. I'm already logged in, so I'm going to click sign out just to make sure that I'm starting from the beginning. And I'll sign in. And here we go. We've got our custom table view cell. That's looking great. If we click on an individual cell, we show Segue over. This is perfect. We're not passing over any data, but that's for a future video. If I click cancel, the cancel button pressed is working. What if we click on plus? We see we bubble up a full screen view controller presented modally from the bottom. That's looking great too. Click on cancel. Excellent work. We'll start to learn new things in the next video. Hopefully the challenges weren't too tough because we've already covered those concepts, but if so, we're here for you. That's why we went ahead and showed you the solution. We'll learn even more new stuff in the next video. Keep at it, Swifter. You're skilled.